Today on r/MaliciousCompliance. You want to micromanage 30 people? Sir, yes sir. My girlfriend was having issues with her micromanaging boss, and made me remember this orchestrated malicious compliance we did back around 23, when I was working for a consulting company. The client we were working for was a bank that had us working from the basement, which consisted on a warehouse full with ATM replacements parts and another retrofitted warehouse with desks for us. You can imagine the type: flickering neon lights, ventilation columns. Only thing resembling a window was a poster of a window the consulting company hung up on one wall. Cell phones weren't that common then, internet was kinda on, but everything was blocked because of the bank's firewall. We had to access Google via IP address. Working there was hard, only distraction was having a talk around the water cooler and going upstairs to get a coffee. We were like 30 people, split into two big teams doing COBOL and one smaller one doing web, .NET and whatever else somebody asked the manager to deliver. I was part of the smaller one. The client asked us to track how long it took to finish each task. This was handled by each of the 3 team leaders, and people had a little bit of leeway on how to report hours spent. So each team member would tell team leader whenever a task was finished and how long it took. It worked pretty well because team leaders were chill and the guys were serious and didn't slack much. The manager, let's call him micromanager, since he was all about micromanaging but also because he was short AF, calls me. I was kinda jack of all trades back then. And my team leader, TL, as in team leader, but also, he was tall AF, so too long, one day and says, "Look guys, I have a feeling we are not working hard enough. I need to be able to report the exact amount of time we spend on each task to the client. I want you to have some kind of software so people can input the time they spend on each thing." TL tries to explain that the current system in place works rather well, and there's no need to change the status quo, that the numbers were accurate and such. Micromanager says that it's not enough, that people are wasting time and he wants accurate tracking. I was like 22 to 23 at that time, first job, but TL had a knack for malicious compliance. So he designed the system. It consisted on a little traffic light in the taskbar. Red meant you were assigned, yellow meant a temporary stop, green meant unassigned. In order to change from one color to the other, a pop-up appeared and you had to input the reason for the change. Then we created a web page that summarized and presented the data anonymously. It also had an export button so Micromanager could check and use it to report himself, faster than how the team leaders were doing it, at least, that was Micromanager's idea. We installed this in every computer and showed how it worked to Micromanager. He was happy and told us to explain the system to the team in order to start the trial run of the idea right away. So we did. TL gathered every single team member and told them that Micromanager wanted an exact tracking of each one. He repeated time and time again the word exact. Like probably 50 times in 5 minutes. He also said that the next day would be a trial run for the software. So, 30 team members understood right away and complied. In an exact way. Here's an example on some of the things I remember. I might remember some of this one's a little embellished, it's been a while, as highlights from the report, with time added up, after the trial day. Arrival, taking coat off, no hanger available, tried to hang it on top of other coat, both fell. 5 minutes. Cough attack, had to get a glass of water. 5 minutes. Joke, morale booster. 2 minutes. Lost track of thought, realized I was looking at the poster of a window instead of a window. 3 minutes. Gone to the toilet. This was like 400 minutes or so, 30 people, 2 times in the day or so. Discussing last night's football match. 50 minutes. Air too cold, had to ask maintenance to up the temperature. 4 minutes. Somebody asked to up the temp, now everybody is sweating, had to ask them to lower temp. 2 minutes. Inputting change of state and traffic light app. Something like 2 hours in total. And the list kept going and going and going. The real data was also there, but it was practically unusable. Before leaving the office, TL called his team, and we had a really good laugh reading the list. The next day, when we arrived, Micromanager called TL, told him something, and TL asked me to uninstall the traffic light app from every computer. For our next story. Can't carry over time to the next year? Okay, that works. To add to the vacation day theme of the week, I worked at a company that had a lot of people that had worked a long time there. It was pretty common for new chemistry or chemical engineering grads to come in as their first job after college. At 20 years they got 6 weeks, 30 days of vacation. Some people liked to work and simply rolled vacation days into the next year. The max you could ever carry over was 45 days. At some point, some bean counter figured out that the 45 days were a liability to the company. If you were selling a chunk of a company off and those people have 6 weeks of vacation and another 9 weeks in the bank, that's 15 weeks of time that the new owner could be on the hook for. So they decided and put out a proclamation that there would be no carryover from one year to the next. Much unhappiness swept the company. Lots of people tried to plan how they were going to use it. One of the key people I worked with came up in October and said they are going on vacation and how much they liked working with me. Which was kind of odd, so I pressed a little on why this sounded like a forever goodbye and not a see you in a week. So I got told, under strict confidence, that they had found a new job. New job started in 2 weeks. They had enough vacation days to cover them to Jan 1, and the next year's vacation and holidays covered the first 2 months of the following year. So they were done. I wished them well, and they were gone. But they were not as good as I am in keeping secrets. There were suddenly a number of key people, also with 6 weeks vacation and large vacation bank, that were gone. Lots of unhappy people in HR. HR could not say no to the close-out vacations since they had decreed the rollover freeze. But HR decreed you must return to work to be able to collect the vacation in the next year. Turns out most of the people got jobs in very cool companies. They all scheduled a vacation day so they could come back to work for a day. They came back en masse. Coworkers scheduled them all into meetings so they had things to do on the day. It was mostly a party day with an all-day food fest. As an added bonus, senior management had indeed planned to split off a division, and the sale fell through because of all the people that had bailed out. Let's dive into our next story. We must get our pictures taken. Okay. I worked in a factory years ago that had what we called the Wall of Shame. It had pictures taken by a professional photographer of all office and floor personnel. As you would expect, the floor personnel were all in dirty factory clothes, office people in dress attire. This was done when that plant opened, and new hires were sent to the photographer's studio for their picture at the end of their first year. I worked third shift and was told that I and another coworker had to go after our shift to get it done. Tried to get out of it but was told in no uncertain terms that we had to go. Cue the seemingly harmless malicious compliance. The coworker I went with was a drinking buddy. I told him at the bar the day before to bring a shirt and tie. He asked why, and I told him it would upset the plant manager. He was in. The next morning we went to the studio and the photographer gave us a puzzled look. He said he thought he had 2 floor workers scheduled, not office workers. For those that don't know, floor workers at most factories are considered extremely stupid trained monkeys. I innocently said we didn't know we couldn't look nice for our pictures. He dubiously took our pictures and sent us on our way. All out. About a month later, my coworker and I were called into the plant manager's office to explain our pictures. He was ready to explode when I again explained we just wanted to look nice as our pictures were being professionally taken. He turned a deep shade of red when I added I didn't know it was against the rules for floor workers to dress up for their pictures. He dismissed us while trying not to flip out on us. My friend and I barely held our laughter as he slammed the door behind us. It gave me great amusement to look at those pictures until they closed the plant. On to the next story. You are not capable of doing my job. Okay. So earlier this year, my boss took 3 months off to have some surgery and recover. I have been working for 28 years in my field and I'm pretty capable of my job. My boss is a highly strung woman who believes only she knows how to do anything. Before my boss took her extended leave, I asked about filling in her role while she was on leave, and she told me, "You are not capable of doing my job." No one here is. I asked again in an email and was told the same thing. I sent the email to all my work colleagues. When they advertised to fill in my boss's role, no one applied. When management asked everyone why did no one apply, they all said they were not capable. There are over 40 staff who did not apply. Someone from another site did apply. He had just completed his new graduate year. They appointed Bob, who was 24. Bob emailed me after a week directing me to do all his work. There was multiple links and document, stock order, meeting agendas, etc. I replied I was happy to do this when I get a free moment. I did nothing. It was clear within a week that Bob had no idea how to be boss and things were going wrong very quickly. I was called to a HR meeting and asked why I wasn't doing Bob's work he instructed me to do. I informed him that I already have a full-time job doing my work, how can I do Bob's as well? Secondly, I showed the email that said no one is capable of doing my boss's job. I was left alone after this. Bob basically did nothing for 3 months. My boss returned blowing up how much work she has to do. She tried to blame the workers on the ground for not being helpful enough. I sent her back her email where she stated that I, nor any staff, was capable of doing her work. We didn't see her leave her office for months. Our last story for today. The 500K compliance fiasco. I work as a senior compliance officer in a large multinational corporation that operates in highly regulated industries. My job is to ensure that we meet all regulatory requirements across different markets. It's a complex job, but after 15 years in the industry, I've seen it all, or so I thought. Our company recently brought in a new CFO, Julia, who was determined to cut costs across the board. She was a numbers person through and through, and in her mind, Compliance was a bloated department that could easily be trimmed down. We had several meetings where she'd question every expense, every process, every role. It was clear that she didn't understand the intricacies of compliance and didn't care to learn. One day, Julia called me into her office and told me that my team was too expensive and that I needed to lay off 30% of my staff. I tried to explain that each person on my team was responsible for managing compliance in different jurisdictions, and cutting staff would put the company at risk of non-compliance, leading to fines or worse. But Julia was having none of it. "We're overstaffed. Make it work or I'll find someone who can," she said. Seeing no other option, I complied. I made the layoffs, reluctantly letting go of some of my most experienced staff. But I knew that this was a ticking time bomb. A few months later, our company was bidding for a massive contract with a government entity worth $500,000. Winning this contract would be a game changer, and the pressure was on to ensure everything was in order. Julia was leading the charge, but the timelines were tight, and we had to submit all compliance documentation within a week. Here's where things got interesting. One of the key compliance documents required for the bid involved an obscure regulation in a small market we operated in. Let's call it Country X. The regulation was something that only one of the laid-off team members, a guy named Peter, had handled. The documentation needed his specific knowledge and a set of reports that were saved on his company-issued laptop, which had been returned and promptly wiped after his departure. Julia, not understanding the gravity of the situation, assumed this was a minor hiccup and ordered me to just find the reports or recreate them. But the process wasn't that simple. The reports were generated through a custom-built tool that Peter had developed over years, and there was no way to replicate them without his expertise. I calmly explained this to Julia, who then realized the severity of the situation. Desperate, Julia asked me to contact Peter and see if he could help us out as a consultant. I reached out to Peter, who was understandably bitter about his sudden layoff but willing to listen, for the right price. I reported back to Julia that Peter was willing to assist, but he was asking for a 6-figure consulting fee. Julia balked at the cost, but realized she had no choice. Peter was the only person who could get us the documents we needed to comply with the regulations in Country XA. Peter returned, and within 2 days he produced the necessary reports. However, when Julia submitted the bid, it was too late. The delays caused by the scramble had already set us back, and the contract went to a competitor who had everything in order on time. The fallout was significant. The company lost out on a $500K deal, and the board of directors was furious. Julia's cost-cutting measures, which had seemed so effective on paper, had directly led to this catastrophic loss. The kicker? Peter's consulting fee and the costs of cleaning up the compliance mess afterward were more than double the savings Julia had achieved by laying off my team. And as for me? The board decided that compliance was too important to be left to the whims of someone who didn't understand it. Julia was quietly let go, and I was promoted to a new role, head of global risk management, with a mandate to ensure that nothing like this ever happened again. I made sure to hire Peter back on a full-time basis with a significant raise. We never spoke of the incident again, but I made it a point to always remind my team that their work, though often invisible, was invaluable. And from then on, compliance was never taken for granted. And those are all the stories we have for today. See you tomorrow.